Will's Race for Home is a middle-grade novel about a black father and son who set out to find a new home during the Oklahoma land rush of 1889. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Ahead, we'll explore the book and talk with the author about the inspiration behind it. Jewell Parker Rhodes is the New York Times best-selling and award-winning author of Ghost Boys, and her other books include Black Brother, Paradise on Fire, and Magic City, just to name a few. She joins us to talk about Will's Race for Home. Jewell, welcome to the Kids Bookshelf.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Well, you talk about this a little bit in the afterword to the book, but tell us about the inspiration for this novel.
You know, it's actually twofold. One, I've always wondered, how did Black folks get to Oklahoma? I knew about the northward migration after slavery of African Americans, but there really is not a great deal of literature on the western migration, and I wasn't taught that in school. And then as an adult novelist, I wrote about the Tulsa Race Massacre in 1921. And then I finally found evidence that land rushers helped build Deep Greenwood. And so I thought, what an interesting comparison to do the adult story, but now do the story of the brave youth, the brave entrepreneurs, the brave African Americans post-slavery who fought to find home and freedom. Even though Deep Greenwood was destroyed, there are still some over 30 all-Black towns in Oklahoma. And the oldest Black rodeo that's been going on since the 1880s still exists. So it's just like I'm always interested in finding history that I don't know about, history that I haven't been taught about in textbooks. And then I'm always wanting to shine a light on how I think young people are so special. And Will in my novel is brave, resilient, loyal, and he finds strengths within himself that makes it possible for him not only to claim a home, but actually build a community.
Now tell us a bit more about what was going on in 1889, because you got the land rush, but in terms of time passed, this is not that long after the Emancipation Act.
No, it's not. And actually, when a lot of the African Americans did the westward migration, they were actually going into what was once Confederate territory. So many of them worked as sharecroppers in Texas, some were in Oklahoma, and yet they were in a circumstance where the greater population did not really care for them and had really fought for them not to be freed. In Texas, in particularly, they kept their slaves enslaved for almost 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So that's why we now have the Juneteenth celebration, because literally they didn't tell their slaves. So in my novel, Will's father and grandfather go to Texas. They work as sharecroppers. It's not a hospital environment. It's really hostile, not hospitable. And they are sharecroppers, which is almost like being a slave, that they are working for a white landowner, because they're not allowed to own land. And they're taking most of their profits and paying it back to the landowner. So in some sense, Will's dad is still looking for freedom. He is still looking for home ownership. He is still trying to escape the travails of slavery, even though it's 1889.
Now, there are 4 major characters in this book, as I see it. 3 of them are human, and 1 is not. 1 is a mule, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But this land rush represents freedom. This land rush represents finding a home where they can be free. And Will is a young man, and this is a huge challenge for him. But over the course of the book, he learns a lot about becoming a man.
Yes, yes. Isn't that so cool? And he also learns a great deal about his dad, that he didn't understand the worries that his dad had, how his dad was always thinking about how can I get ahead. And he saw his father's preoccupation with making a family and making it safe for his family as distance, emotional distance from him, the son. So they also go through the journey where father and son come to understand each other, and I love that, love that, love that they become closer. So yes, it's somewhat of a complicated but short novel, but I think it's complicated in that humanity, we always never think about walking in the other person's shoes. We should, but sometimes we forget. And when you're young, you truly don't even think about it. So this journey teaches Will empathy, not only for others, but most importantly for his father and his father's quest. And I like how Will just thought, oh, I'm going to have an adventure. I'm going to have an adventure. And it's much more challenging than he ever thought. And he's called upon to do things, save lives, human and animal, in ways that he didn't even know that he had it in him. So really, the son becomes a kind of, adult, becomes that man. But the big thing is his secret power is reading. Slaves were forbidden to read and write. Will's father works so hard he doesn't have time to learn how to read, but Will's mother has taught him how to read, and it's a prize. And actually, the father didn't want to take him on the journey until the mother says, but he can read. That might be useful. And sure enough, the novel would not have a good ending had it not been for Will's superpower about reading. So that connection of literacy and children, folks, read, 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 and read some more, because that gives you skills that help you to make it in this world against people who would steal from you, who would try to take your land. And it also gives you the ability to critically think. And it just is a wonderful, wonderful skill, and even more necessary for a community who didn't know how to read, finally learning to read and acquiring all that knowledge.
Another important character in this book is Caesar, and he is a Civil War veteran. And this book is told in first person by Will. And Will comments that there are men who wanted to go home from that war, who wanted to go back to how their lives were before, but some of them couldn't. And Caesar was one of those that couldn't, because he's haunted by the war and what he did and witnessed in that war.
Oh, Dan, you said that so beautifully. And I also think about how sometimes men and now women, are called to serve. And, particularly Caesar, he fought for freedom. He fought, for all his people to be free. And yet, because he has a skill, because he fought on a side, all the people in the western states, pretty much in Texas and Oklahoma, see him still as an enemy. And I remember the morning when I was writing the novel, it had been like maybe 9 months into writing, and finally it hit me. They're still fighting the Civil War. And I think there are echoes of that in society today, that some people still haven't put to rest the animus against, one another in terms of the Civil War battle. But Caesar decides to help Will and his father, but then he is still a target for people who would, attack him. And then he feels he puts the family in danger. I gotta say that Caesar was also based on Shane. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Shane, and I read the book Shane, and there's a point where everybody loves this gunslinger, but people want to test their mettle against Shane. Just like people want to test their mettle against Caesar, the Union officer, and eventually, Shane does leave, and the little boy says, Shane, come back, Shane, please, because he's going to miss him so. But my Will grows so much in character, grows so much in becoming a man himself that he recognizes that Caesar is making the right decision, that Caesar does in fact have to go, and it's time for Will to stand on his own 2 feet.
I'm talking with Jewell Parker Rhodes about Will's race for home, and our conversation will continue. If you're enjoying this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. The other important relationship in Will's life is Belle, the mule. You're introduced to Belle at the beginning, and Belle's there at the end and goes along with these adventures with him. Why was it important for you to create that relationship for Will?
Well, I did think a kid on a sharecropping farm would have been distanced from other children. He would have been working very hard with his father. So there must have been a degree of loneliness, in that sort of cotton sharecropping space. So Belle has that loving loyalty. I love animals. And there's a one point where Will says, Belle is my only friend. And that's true. But also, I wanted to celebrate that without animals, we would not have made the westward migration, that humanity needed oxes, mules, horses in order to carry out their sort of like claim of the Western tradition. But I do love Belle, and I love how Belle loves Caesar's horse, Midnight. And these two animals, there's a wonderful picture in the book where they're sort of like, nose to nose. But these two animals represent the best of the animal world, and they give their heart to Will and make his dreams come true.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about those illustrations because this is a middle grade book. Obviously, it's not a picture book like you have for younger kids, but there are illustrations in the book. So tell us a bit about those.
Thank you. I love illustrations. I think that the idea of another artist complementing your work makes it more interesting for the reader to see, especially since we become such a visual society. I think it actually helps young readers go through my books. But I'm very happy with the illustrations. Not too many, but just enough to sort of like spur you on to see the love, say, between the animals, or Will battling a snake, just to add another level of excitement for middle graders.
Well, in addition to the novel itself, you've included an afterword with more information. Tell us a little bit about what readers will find there.
Well, in the afterword, most particularly, I wanted to explain how what a shame it was having left slavery, been emancipated, that there were brave men and women and children who made it through the land rush, claimed land, built towns only by the 1920s, which is not long after 1889, to have some of those lands under attack, like the city Deep Greenwood, which was totally destroyed and had to be rebuilt. So that echoing of the Civil War going on and on and on sort of like comes through in waves throughout the book.
Well, this book is Will's Race for Home. What's next for you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm doing a sequel, which I never do, but I am, to Treasure Island Runaway Gold. And this time it's going to be set in New Orleans. We're still going to have skateboarding Zane and his rat terrier hip hop, but we're going to have lots of African diaspora spirituality and magic. And then I'm thinking of doing a novel based on robots and penguins in the Antarctica. I love to write different things. So I say to youth, well, if you don't like one of my books, read another one, which is why it's so strange that I'm doing a sequel to Treasure Island. But it's going to be totally different, I promise you, in a lot of different ways. But I love setting challenges. But most importantly, I love discovering things that I didn't know before. So writing for me is just like reading. It helps me grow as a person. It teaches me things, and it makes me feel as though I've lived lives that I actually haven't lived. They're just all in my heart and in my imagination.
The book is Will's Race for Home by Jewell Parker Rhodes. Jewell, thank you for talking with me today.
Oh, Dan, thank you very, very much. This novel is dear to my heart, and I promise you, folks, if you start it, you'll keep going because there's lots of adventure, lots of excitement, and most importantly, I try to do my very best for all youth readers.
If you'd like to purchase Will's Race for Home, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. Thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. I'm Dan Skinner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.